This is Alex J. Aguirre, and welcome to a special edition of Pod With Me.
Ready.
Welcome, everybody. Please sit down, relax, but hang on tight. It might be useful if you get a little glass of wine. You see, the last couple months for all of us have been pretty bumpy. In fact, 2020 has been bumpy. But it all feels like invaders of the body snatchers came down and took over people's bodies and are saying and doing stuff that you cannot even believe you're hearing or seeing. Get ready, because it's going to be a bumpy pod. And it starts now.
I want what you have, and I deserve it now.
It is your government that's doing it to you. Your government has been taken over.
But in the new woke world, you can't state the truth.
So it's not that the child is non-binary, it's that the child just doesn't have any gender yet.
Last weekend, we had so many deaths.
I disagree with the idea that there's police brutality that is disproportionately affecting Black Americans.
White people who love the Candace Owens because she gets to say stuff they can't. They're playing to white supremacy.
This is their final stage in saying race, racism, race is the problem, race, black people, race, systematic racism. That's why you're not successful.
Ready.
Alex, are you ready to pod?
Ready?
Let's go.
Roll sound.
All right, everybody. So let's start off with our political arena. We have the right and we have the left. Which side are you on? I was never really political until now because things are getting a little bit scary and I think it's wise to see what's going on. So in my political journey, I decided to get out of the mainstream media and see what other outlets are saying, do my research, and here's what I found.
Ready.
We all know racism is wrong, but that's not what this is about. This is just another effort of the Democrats to attack the president. The third whereas in the resolution says you perpetuate anti-Asian bias if you use the terms Chinese virus or Wuhan virus. Well, someone should have told the media this. CNN called it the Wuhan virus. MSNBC called it the Chinese coronavirus. ABC, CBS called it China's coronavirus. CNBC called it the China coronavirus. So someone should have told the media that you couldn't use these terms. Frankly, someone should have told the Democrats a few months ago that a few months later, the mob, the cancel culture, would say this is a term you can't use because the Democrats used it on their committee notice. January 29th, 2020, committee notice, House Foreign Affairs, Subcommittee on Asia, Pacific, and non-proliferation, a tough one for me to say. Congressman Barrett, the chairman, says in the subject line of the hearing for the following week, subject, the Wuhan coronavirus. Someone should have told the Democrats you can't use that term, but in the new woke world, you can't state the truth. As Mr. Collins pointed out, did the virus start in China? Yes. Did the virus start in Wuhan, China? Yes. Did China lie to the United States about the severity and the origins of this virus? Yes. Did China lie to the world about the virus? Yes, they did. Did the World Health Organization lie to the United States? Yes, they did. Did the World Health Organization lie to the rest of the world? The answer to every one of those questions is yes, but you can't say that. Not in the world, not in the politically correct cancel call. You can't state the truth. You can't state that the Chinese government launched a disinformation campaign to cover up its role in exacerbating the spread of COVID-19. You can't say the cover-up included punishing doctors, limiting the access of journalists, censoring the internet, spreading disinformation, and withholding information from the entire international community. You can't say that. You can't say a Chinese government official publicly and falsely claimed that the United States Army brought it to Wuhan. The Chinese government's failure to institute a full-scale public response and underreporting of COVID-19 cases and deaths propelled the virus on the course that it's been on. But you can't say all that. You could a few months ago. But you can't today. That's the cancel culture world. That's how the mob operates today. You used to be able to say, as Mr. Collins pointed out, the West Nile virus, the Zika virus, German measles, Spanish flu. Not today. Not today. They'll attack you if you don't say it the way they want you to say it. And this is dangerous. You can't say China virus today, and tomorrow who knows what it will be. But like I said a few months ago, Even the Democrat committee chairman used the very term that's in their resolution they're saying you can't use today because somehow it's anti-Asian bias. I think it's more to do with the fact that we're 7 weeks before an election. This is just one more way to go after the president. But we should all remember, this is dangerous. When you start saying certain things can't be said, if you don't say it the way we, the politically correct, the cancel culture mob, want you to say it, you have to be quiet. Silence is the biggest threat to the First Amendment, and that's what we're seeing. And they want to just say this is broader, this is bigger. I would say look at the sports world. Look at the sports world. Drew Brees says you should stand for the national anthem. He gets attacked. Mike Gundy, football coach at Oklahoma State, goes fishing with his kids and wears what the mob says is the wrong T-shirt. He almost loses his job. He wore a T-shirt that had a conservative news outlet on the T-shirt. Oh, my goodness. You can't coach football if you wear the wrong T-shirt fishing with your kids, according to the mob. You can't say a term today that just a few months ago they used on their committee notice. You can't say it today because that's what the mob says. James Harden says back the blue on a mask. He has to answer for that. Last week, two high school football players on 9/11 run on the field with a back the blue flag and a flag supporting our firefighters, and they get suspended because today the mob says that's not okay. We need to understand the cancel culture, restricting, limiting, telling you what you can and can't say is so darn dangerous, and it will never stop because the mob never quits. You don't believe me? 2 weeks ago, the mayor of this city, our nation's capital, has a proposal to remove and relocate the Washington Monument and the Jefferson Memorial. This is how ridiculous it gets. And maybe I'll just finish with this. Maybe the most ridiculous thing is the last clause, the last page of their resolution. The last page says, recommit United States leadership in building more inclusive, diverse, and tolerant societies to combat misinformation. Now think about this for a second. If you state the truth, the virus started in China, you're a bad guy. You're not allowed to state the truth. This resolution says that's misinformation. The very misinformation that happened was China misinforming the world, lying to the world. You're not allowed to talk about that. You have to do, this resolution says you have to do it the politically correct, the woke way, the cancel culture way. And that's why this is so darn wrong. So darn wrong. I hope we don't continue to travel down this road. This is scary where the left wants to take the country. So dangerous for the First Amendment and free speech rights. Madam Chair, I reserve. Was it a disgrace a few months ago when the Democrat chairman called it the Wuhan coronavirus? Or is it just a disgrace now when we're less than 7 weeks before an election? You guys want to continue to attack the president. Which is it? Because it can't be a disgrace just now when you use the exact same language that the Democrat chairman, the Democrat staff used for their subcommittee hearing. So you can get all fired up and start yelling at us, but the truth is you guys used it, the same terms you're now saying, oh, they are so bad in this resolution. The hypocrisy from the left and the mob on what you can say today and can't say tomorrow is ridiculous, and the American people see it. They see it. They know this is complete BS. They know it is completely about the election. Madam Speaker, what we should also do is denounce violence, all the violence we see in our urban areas. And the Democrats were given that opportunity just 2 months ago when the Attorney General of the United States asked them, why won't you speak out against the violence in our cities? Why won't you speak out against what the mob is doing in our cities? And guess what we got from them, Dr. Barrow? We got silence. So let's speak out against the violence we see for over 100 days in Portland and so many of our other great cities. The House said the Russians are trying to jeopardize the security of our election. Well, so are the Democrats. Democrats are trying to win the election after the election. Democrats in Pennsylvania have filed a lawsuit that says you can fix errors on absentee ballots after the ballot has been returned to the Board of Elections. Now, I don't even know what that means. What, can you vote in a race you didn't vote in? Can you change your vote? What does that mean? You can fix errors after you've already submitted the ballot. In Nevada, Democrats passed a law that says you can accept mail-in ballots 3 days after the election even if the postmark on the ballot, on the envelope, can't be distinguished, the postmark date. They're trying to win the election after the election. That's scary. The speaker said the White House is using dangerous and offensive language. The premise of the resolution in front of us is language can cause people to take action. And if you use the term China virus, Wuhan virus, somehow that will lead to bias against Asian American people. Even though they used the term China virus, Wuhan virus, everyone in the mainstream media used it. They used it in a committee hearing notice. Even though all that's there, they now say, oh, if you use those terms, it will lead to anti-Asian bias. But they don't talk about the language they use, the left uses, the language the speaker uses, and how that may create an environment that will lead to violence. The Speaker of the House called the President of the United States an enemy of the state and said his supporters in the Congress, Republicans, are enemies of the state. Well, they don't talk about that. No, China virus can lead people to take action, but no, not when the Speaker of the House calls the President of the United States and Republican members of Congress enemies of the state. 2 years ago, Democrat member of Congress, chair of a committee, said this 2 years ago this summer. If you see somebody in the Trump cabinet, you create a crowd, you push back on them, you tell them they're not welcome anymore, anywhere. She encouraged her constituents to approach people in the Trump administration, harass them, tell them they're not welcome anymore, anywhere. She encouraged direct action. That is far different than using the term China virus, which they used, which they had in a committee notice. This individual member of Congress said, go harass people in the Trump cabinet. The Speaker of the House calls Republicans enemies of the state. And that's all fine by them. But you say the virus started in Wuhan, China. Somehow you're terrible. This is the crazy world the left is in today. The crazy world they're in today. And again, as I said earlier by the gentleman from Texas, and by others, I think the American people see right through this baloney, see right through it.
Ready.
Not just with Bernie Sanders or Ocasio-Cortez, but with the mainstream of the Democratic Party embracing socialist ideas. Socialism is in the forefront in a way it's never been before. So that requires explanation. I think the short answer is we're dealing with a new type of socialism. The socialists say today, no, we're not trying to replicate the socialism of Mao or Stalin or Lenin. Our socialism is new in key respects. We're trying to essentially do what previous socialisms failed to do.
Yeah, previous socialisms failed, meaning 100 million people have been killed under socialist regimes in the last 100 years, and yet they think that they can somehow replicate it and make it better.
The socialism that we're pursuing is, in fact, the socialism of Venezuela. There are close parallels between Venezuelan socialism and American socialism. However, the official doctrine of the left here is to deny that, and is to say the socialism that they're pursuing, they say, is the socialism of Scandinavia. So the Scandinavians are actually, they want to create a big pie. Now, when they distribute it, and here is the key point, they impose the burden on the whole society. So they have high tax rates on the middle class, typically 50%. In Sweden, if you make $70,000, you start off by turning half of that, $35,000, to the government. So they don't practice this politics of demonizing the rich. The rich will pay. I'm going to rob Peter to pay Paul so I can get Paul's vote. The Scandinavians don't do that. So the truth of it is that the American left says we want to be like Scandinavia, but they don't want to follow the Scandinavian model.
First off, what is socialism?
Socialism it's a little bit of an amoeba term because there was socialism before Marx. The earliest forms of socialism were voluntary communities of people who came together, typically like 100 guys. They pooled all their stuff and they shared everything. In fact, there was kind of a free love component to these communities as well. So these were essentially voluntary communities of people who wanted to live together and not have inequality. Now, Marx came along and basically said, you people are fools. You can do what you want, but this is no model for the world. And Marx introduced the concept of class division. So for Marx, the world is divided into two groups of people, basically the rich and the poor. Marx calls them the proletariat or the working class, and then the capitalist class. And for Marx, there's always a fight between these two groups, in which will eventually end with the workers being so oppressed that they will overthrow the capitalist class and take over. And then you would have sort of the perfect society. What's interesting about American socialism is it incorporates this Marxian class division, but it adds other forms of division. So for American socialists now, it's not just rich against poor, it's black against white. It's male against female. It's straight against gay. It is legal against illegal. So I call this identity socialism because it's a marriage of classic socialism and identity politics. So you can almost say that the leftists today are more divisive than Marx because they want to cut up society 8 different ways, and their goal is to cobble together a majority coalition of 51% of oppressed victims. That's what they're after. So they're worse than Robin Hood. See, Robin Hood basically didn't keep it for himself. He had nothing to gain in the Robin Hood story. He was doing it because he was Robin Hood. But see, these politicians have a lot to gain. What they're basically saying is, I'm going to rob Peter to pay Paul so I can count on Paul's vote. Mm-hmm. So there's something in it for them. These are Robin Hoods who are advancing themselves in the name of helping the poor.
That's exactly right. What is, if anything, the difference between socialism and communism?
A good way to think about it is that communism is a political system, and socialism is, at root, an economic system. They're cousins. They go well together. The Soviet Union was communist and socialist. And at some point, it overthrew both. So the Soviet Union now has a certain type of gangster capitalism, but it's neither communist nor socialist. But look at China. China was a communist socialist society. It got rid of the socialism by moving toward a peculiar type of market system, a market system controlled by the state, but nevertheless a relatively free market. But it kept its communist political structure intact. So no democracy, no free elections, controlling the lives of the people, but they can work, they can become millionaires, they can make products, they can gain money. So China is a really good example of the way of preserving communism while jettisoning socialism.
Right, because they keep that totalitarian system in place. You think that lasts long term, or will there eventually be a clash?
Well, the Chinese they're kind of offering their citizens a bargain, which is that you've been poor, desperately starving peasants for millennia. We're going to basically fill your stomach, and we don't want you to say one word about your rights because we're giving you something you've never had before. And they're trying to keep the Chinese content with that bargain. And that's the question. Turning to coronavirus for a second, the left needs today the politics of fear. This is kind of why they try to whip us into a frenzy all the time. See, Marx thought you wouldn't need any of this. Marx thought that the revolution was scientific. It would come automatically. You don't even have to fight for it because it's going to happen by a law of history. But nowhere did the workers revolt against the capitalist class, not in Marx's time, and not to this day anywhere in the world. So the left has realized Marx was wrong about that. There's nothing scientific about socialism. What we need is panic. So, FDR discovered in the Depression, I can do all kinds of stuff that I could never have done if we weren't in this Great Depression. And then since the 70s, the left is like, we're running out of food. In the 80s, nuclear apocalypse. In the 90s, the ozone layer's going away. The last 20 years, climate change, the oceans are rising. And now coronavirus, the theme is the same. We want to take rational people and create a crowd stampede. So because crowds behave differently than rational individuals in the crowd. If you can get people to think that their lives are in danger and they have to run, then they behave in ways, they do things, they submit to irrationality, and the left thrives.
And that is exactly right. And I'm so glad you said that because really in chaos, dictatorship can arise. And what I mean by that is it's so easy for them to pass legislations and people don't think twice.
Credit.
Never been more confident in what I have said about Black Lives Matter and the protests in the United States than I am tonight. That the slogan is the Trojan horse for a pretty nasty movement. That the well-meaning people who were there for George Floyd months ago have now been replaced and gone, and the only people left are the hardcore Marxists, the ones who believe I want what you have, and I deserve it now. This is a Black Lives Matter protester screaming at white homeowners, suggesting that they needed to hand over the keys to their properties because they're on stolen land.
Hey guys, do you know that you are living in a historically black neighborhood right now? Do you know that? Do you know that before Joe White ass came here, this was all black people? Do you know that? Do you know that? Do you know people like you came in here and basically bought all the land from the black people for less than what it was worth, kicked them out so you can live here? Do you know that?
The Black Lives Matter narrative is getting more and more ridiculous every single day. And here we have a stunning case, Breonna Taylor, where actually every single piece of information that was provided us through the media was an absolute lie. You can actually log on and read the transcripts from when her ex-boyfriend, Jamarcus Glover, got arrested back in 2018. They actually recorded their jail conversations between her and the entire network of the people that were moving drugs through the neighborhood, okay? He was asking her to do things in his place. She was involved, and she was also made it very clear that she was worried because she loved him so much that he was going to end up in serious trouble one day. Unfortunately, she didn't worry enough about herself and what trouble she was going to be in one day. This is a case that comes down to personal responsibility. Of course, the most important part about this case, which no one is talking about, is that they fired first. They shot a police officer, and I shouldn't say they, I should say the guy that she was with at the time, Kenneth Walker, fired and shot a police officer before hiding behind her and running to the back of the house. And she then took all of the bullets from the returning bullets from the police officer as they were standing in a hallway side by side next to each other. So the police come, they knock on the door, okay? And they say police. Why do we know that's true? Because Kenneth Walker himself verified that him and Breonna Taylor heard the knock at the door, and the neighbors came outside to speak to the police officers. The neighbors have verified that the police officer said it's the police, okay? Now, you hear people who have white guilt, and people, doesn't matter. How do they know it was the police? I don't know. Shoot first and ask questions later. I wouldn't know it was the police if you knocked and said the police. Okay, would you grab your gun and fire at them? Wouldn't you look out the window, check the peephole to see what's going on before the police officers barge into your house, which they have a right to do because they have a warrant on them? Do you understand that Breonna Taylor is dead? That is sad. It is the fault of Kenneth Walker for firing at a police officer. Black Lives Matter started at the principle that unarmed black Americans were being shot and killed for no reason by police officers. We have now dramatically shifted the narrative to Black Lives Matter, which means even when a black American is armed, shoots a police officer, and the police officer has a warrant to arrest and to inspect that property and take drugs, still the black American is somehow a victim. That is pointedly ridiculous. And let me also tell you something else. It is the bigotry of low expectations. Stop believing. If you are a white person, you've been defending this and you've been wearing a Breonna Taylor t-shirt and you've been demanding justice for Breonna, then you should be demanding that her boyfriend serves time in prison for firing at a police officer. You should not be demanding a police officer's figurative head on a stick, okay? These are the people that protect and serve the community. You keep saying Black Lives Matter. Did any of the black lives that were having crack cocaine moved into their neighborhood by this whole organization of criminals matter to you at all? Did you know maybe somebody overdosed on the drugs that this group was selling? Did that matter to you at all? Did any of that? The black lives only matter when the narrative that you hope, that you wake up every day and you hope that you're going to see is that police officers are killing black people for no reason. This case is an unfortunate one. It is not a case of police brutality. It is not a case that has anything to do with race, okay? You could have put a white person, you could have put a meth lab in there. If police went to serve a warrant and it was a bunch of white kids selling meth and they knocked on the door and the meth kids shot at them, the police would have shot back. It's called protecting your life because police officers have families to go home to. What more do you want police officers to do? They investigated. They had a warrant. They were at the right residence. Breonna Taylor's name was on the warrant. Jamarcus Glover's name was on the warrant. They did everything the right way. They went to the court, got the warrant, knocked on the door, and announced themselves, even though they didn't have to. They could have no-knocked it. They could have barged on the door and gone in the way that the FBI raided Roger Stone's house. Okay? Did Roger Stone, by the way, shoot at FBI raid officers when they swarmed his household? Did he go, oh, well, I didn't know who it was, so I just shot first and asked questions later? No, he didn't do that. He didn't do that. So it is entirely possible that when police officers knock to serve your warrant and bang down your door, that you don't shoot at a police officer and then hide behind your girlfriend and allow her to take the bullets. Why are we not having that conversation about personal responsibility? Oh, I know, because we always have to infantilize Black America. So this is no longer, movement is no longer about saving Black lives. No, it's about treating Black people like toddlers. It's no longer about equality. It's about exceptions. It's no longer about equality. It's about entitlements, right? You want Black people to be entitled to things that no one else in America are going to be entitled about. That's what Black Lives Matter activists are about, right? Beyonce, I want justice for Breonna Taylor. I called the Attorney General and told him I want justice. Oh, because you sang single ladies, you can make a phone call and tell them not to do their job, and you want to make sure police officers serve time for what? For defending their lives when they're fired at? What is wrong with you guys? What kind of a world do we live in when we can no longer distinguish between right and wrong? Do you realize how scary that is? That we have people that are actively defending criminals every single day. There has not been a single instance this year that Black Lives Matter has jumped on where the Black person was not involved in some level of criminality. Not George Floyd, who was on fentanyl, ingested fentanyl before his arrest, was obviously, if you have now read the labs, they are saying he died of a drug overdose and there was actually no injury sustained to his neck despite watching the case, right? A man that had methamphetamine and fentanyl and was trying to use counterfeit bills. Was he a pure victim? Absolutely not. Jacob Blake, he was a guy who had a warrant out for his arrest for digitally raping a Black woman and telling her that she smelled like she had been with someone else, right? According to the warrant for his arrest. Does anybody care about that Black woman? No, because it's not about Black lives, right? But Jacob Blake, he got shot in the back as he was going to grab a knife and was running from police officers. So who cares? He's a victim because he got killed by police officers. Rayshard Brooks physically beats police officers, grabs their taser and shoots at them in Atlanta, and oh my God, watch the city burn, because this guy, they should have just let him go. They should have just let Rayshard Brooks leave with the taser, because it doesn't really matter. They could have gotten him later, because the job of a police officer is to make sure that the Black man gets away safely with a weapon and is allowed into a neighborhood. Not that the Black man should be apprehended immediately because he's a risk to the rest of the community. A job for a police officer is to protect and serve the community, not to protect and serve the criminals. Yes, it would be nice if criminals didn't fight back when they were being apprehended. It would be nice. In a perfect world, all of these warrants and all of these arrests would go off without a hitch, right? But a level of that taking place, if we actually want to aspire to that perfect arrest scenario, then it takes two to tango. You have to listen to instructions from police officers. Is this the result of the Black community having such a high rate of father absences? I'm just trying to understand. I can't wrap my head around not listening to instructions and not listening to authority and running away and beating and trying to hit a police officer. It boggles my mind. Like, are we just not being raised to think that we have to listen to any rules? And is that breakdown of family also transpiring because we have a culture of celebrities like LeBron James who are pretending that these people are all victims and innocent, and people like Beyonce writing letters to attorney generals who will not acknowledge that we are playing a role in this? Philando Castile in 2016 was an honest-to-God victim. We all remember watching that tape. It was sad. It was devastating. The police officer thought he was going to pull for a gun when in reality he was pulling for his wallet. That is an example of a very sad case, an example of a true victim. I have not seen any cases this year that Black Lives Matter has presented where I cannot pinpoint the exact thing that the person did that was wrong. Breonna Taylor was a victim of her own bad choices and circumstances, okay? She was a victim of her boyfriend and her boyfriend's bad choices and circumstances. This is what happens when you hang out with drug dealers, people that have guns on them, people that their instinct is to shoot first. This is what happens, okay? So spare me your white guilt. Do me a favor and spare me your white guilt. If you are a black person, spare me your Black Lives Matter mantra and think for a second about the society that you are helping to create and build right now. If you are an American, have some decency to start defending our police officers and our law enforcement officers who get up every day and suit up and do the right thing by trying to remove criminals from the street. This poor police officer was shot at, and now he's going to have to watch all of Louisville burn because of a narrative that somehow it was unjust. When he got shot, it was unjust somehow because he's a police officer and was doing the right thing, that he's evil. I'm just getting so sick of this. Black Lives Matter, in my opinion, is a terrorist organization. It is sowing division in this country and it is collecting billions in the process, and nobody knows where the billions of dollars is going. It is certainly not going to help rebuild black communities. In fact, you are going to see that tonight when another black community burns because of what happened. Because Black Lives Matter is in there burning down a community once again where black people live, where black people work, where law-abiding black people like myself and the majority of the black community have to sit here and suffer this BS narrative.
Ready.
But suddenly they create this thing where it's just like you have to be for all of these things, no matter what your other set of beliefs are.
So that is the rub right now with Black Lives Matter, because when you go to the Black Lives Matter, the organization's website, right? And I'm not talking about, the Don Lemons running cover for them in the media. I'm not talking about when you go to the organization's website, they say things like they're in favor of abolishing the nuclear family, centering LGBTQIA plus queer people, all of this stuff that the vast majority of regular working class Black Americans are not super into or even down with. So there is a lot of that tension there. And this is the problem with when you let brands, organizations, and corporations define Black, because Black Lives Matter does not define Blackness. My Blackness is not defined by Black Lives Matter, any of their founders, or any of the people that have, put themselves in the position to speak for this organization. Like I said, this is an organization, this is a corporation, this is a business, and they don't speak for me. So there is a lot of tension there. And furthermore, so I talk a lot about, I say LGBTQ cult a lot, right? So there are gays and there are lesbians and there are bisexuals and there are transgender people, most of which are law-abiding, tax-paying citizens that just want to live their lives and to pretty much be left alone. Then there is the LGBTQ cult. And the cultists say that you will listen to whatever we say, whatever we change is the idea. So if we want to use pronouns, this is what you call us, or else we will fine you. If you do not agree with adding transgender women to the spaces for actual women, you are now transphobic. And it is all of that stuff that is going crazy. And it's stuff, and I break this down. There's a whole chapter in this book called Escaping the LGBTQ Cult, where I kind of break all that stuff down. And that is the stuff that most people are not down with. Most people don't care about gays and lesbians. We're past that point now. But they see all the cult stuff and they think that represents all of us, and it just doesn't.
Yeah, so let's talk about the cult stuff a little bit, because we've talked about this privately a bunch. That the T part of this, the transgender part, you and I as gay people, we have no more insight into what it is to be a trans person than a straight person does. We were born in the right body. We have same-sex attraction, but that's not being born in the wrong body that you identify with, let's say. Yet the T thing has sort of now taken over the entire movement. And you were telling me last time I saw you that you think it's actually rabidly anti-gay. And I think it's a pretty interesting theory.
Yeah. So look, the transgender movement, as we know it today, especially the very hard left transgender movement, is one of the most homophobic movements I've ever seen in my life, because it is this idea that if you are a gay man or even a gay boy, because now, a feminine little boy is now being pushed towards transition and puberty blockers and all of this other stuff by the radical leftist transgender movement. So it's this idea that if you are in some way not conforming to typical standards of gender, then you must be the other gender, right? The literally other sex. So if you're a little femme gay boy, then no, you're really a woman. If you're a masculine, sort of like butchy, a lesbian, then no, you're really a man. And from what I've learned about some of they call them radical feminists that are really fighting against that ideology, is that this transgender movement and the radical elements of it are affecting teenage girls the most. And the mainstream media is so afraid to stand up against that lobby, they do not report that. And you have somebody like Joe Biden that is literally running on your gender is what you say it is, and if that's so, then they should be put in women's prisons. And this is something that Joe Biden has literally said. It's in the book. Yeah. It's a real thing, and it's another way the media is running cover for them right now.
Yeah, just to keep going with that for a second, the twisted part of it is that they, in many ways, are the ones who are conforming more so to traditional ideas of gender, because they're the ones that are going, oh, if you're a boy, but you act a little more feminine, so you're 5 years old and instead of playing with G.I. Joes, as I did, you play with Barbie, well, then we must transition you to a girl. So oddly, it's their view of gender that in many ways is more traditional than someone just saying, okay, he's a boy, he plays with Barbie, and he'll grow up to love whoever he loves.
It's true. And you know what? The more insidious thing about the far left trans movement that's going on right now is that they are starting to align themselves with the more hardcore homophobic elements of the religious right. So we're talking far right, the people that haven't really gotten over their homophobia, because in some of these people's minds, they would rather have a transgender daughter than a gay son, right? They would rather have a trans son than just a daughter that is lesbian. And you see a lot of that stuff happening right now. So there's this very weird sort of alignment that's happening on the fringes, on the very far left and the very far right. It's homophobic. It has obviously no basis in real science. And look, I take a lot of stuff when I really dig deep into this, but I've fought, for the rights of gays and lesbians for my entire career. And I just want these young gay and lesbian teenagers to be comfortable with who they are, because they are being set down a path that is going to lead down to nothing but permanent unhappiness, in the physical destruction of their body, in this idea that somehow transitioning is going to make them happy. And look, the post-transition suicide rates do not bear that out. They're very, very high. So if this was really, truly making people happy, then why did the suicide rates go up post-transition instead of down? But the more the left is able to engage people that look like me, that have my same sexual orientation, whatever, the more that the left and leftism is able to rein them in their clutches based purely on these immutable characteristics, I think the weaker that we become as Americans and the further we get from that identity as Americans that I'm trying to push us. So that is why I use identity politics in this way. That is why I call myself America's favorite Black gay Republican. And for anybody that has any problems with that, you don't have to support me. You don't have to buy the book. You don't have to do anything at all.
Look at you. You're not going to force people to support you. You truly are a liberty lover.
Ready.
There are two genders, male and female. Sometimes you're not lucky enough to be born into the right one, so you transition into the one that you suit the most.
Which seems to me eminently sensible, and I have complete respect for people that do that. It's not an easy process, physically, psychologically, emotionally, or any of those things. I salute you for your common sense. Now, let's bring you into this equation.
Benjamin,
you think it is right?
How do you identify?
I'm a man. That's right. So,
and gender? What are you?
I'm a cisgendered man.
What does cis mean?
So that means if you were born a woman, and therefore you still identify as a woman, so you're a cisgendered woman, I would say.
And that's because of my physical.
That's because
femaleness.
You identify with how you were born originally. Well, I assume you're a cisgendered.
I'm not a cis anything,
if I may assume.
I'm not a cis anything.
Well,
I'm just a man.
Well, no, but you're a cisgendered man.
No, I'm not a cisgendered anything.
But hang on.
What does cis mean?
Well, that means that you were born the way that you identify
No,
now.
I'm just born a man.
But someone who transitions.
Why are you
to be a
insisting
man-
on calling me something I'm not?
Well, you can refer to yourself as just a man if you like. But
I think most people identify as male or female, man or woman.
That's right. The vast majority of people. But that doesn't mean that there aren't other people who identify differently.
There are 100
lots of other
different
identities.
genders on this BBC list, apparently. Right? One of them is two-spirit person, polygender, pangender, neutroids, intergender.
I have to
gender
say,
non-conforming.
Do you know what they mean?
I have no idea what they mean, and I'm part.
Right. Well,
I'm
luckily we have the
supposedly
world
part of the
expert here.
community.
What is any of this?
Look, I can't. Don't ask me to list off.
What's a
all
two-spirit
100.
person?
I think that's someone who identifies with their native background into their gender.
Do you not think this is just like a vibe that somebody's having? Like when you tick a list, male or female, doing your passport or something, is this not just, this is just how they are? This is just a bit of a vibe.
Do you know what aporogender is?
No.
They're very
You
sorry
actually,
about
even
it.
though you support what the BBC is doing. This, by the way, this is the public
Is that what
broadcaster.
it is?
No, I don't know.
Hang on. The public broadcaster paid for by us with the licence fee is now instructing children. There are 100 genders they can identify as. You have come to defend it, and you don't know what half of these are.
But hang on, Piers. Ignorance isn't a defence.
You're the ignorant one, and you're the one defending it.
Well, Piers, you're the one that doesn't know what it is as well, of course.
I'm about to tell you.
Do you know what?
Aporogender is a fairly new word stemming from the Greek apor, meaning separate. Aporogender is an umbrella term meaning a gender separate from male, female, and anything in between, while still having a very strong and specific gendered feeling. That latter part is key, then distinguishing it from agender.
Is this how
which
they're
somebody
explaining it to
who I-
children?
By the way, can you explain that to me? What does that mean?
Well, that means that someone identifies differently to you, and that's what is at the
No.
heart of it.
Can you explain
But
what
that's just a
aporogender
personality,
is,
isn't
which is
it?
one of the 100 genders that kids now have to be?
For us to get our heads around 100 different gender identities, and I think Nicole makes a really good point. It actually is about personality,
Yeah,
isn't it?
it's just their thing. If I was sat in... I mean, I spent my whole childhood watching The Animals of Farthing Wood. You know, you're impressionable. You know, you've got to be careful.
But you didn't identify...
No, but I thought I was a squirrel. I thought I was going to grow up and be surrounded in a tree, surrounded by nuts. You know,
Benjamin, what is neutroids?
But, oh, come on. Are we going to go through all 100?
Do you know any of them?
I need
Well, I
to
know some
know
of them,
what...
yeah. But look, here's my
Mate, you
point.
come on, no offence, you
No,
come
no,
on
no.
national television to defend the BBC telling kids there are 100 genders. I'm now reading out a number of these 100 genders. A, you've never heard of them. B, you've no idea what they are. But C, you want to encourage the
Hang on.
BBC to instruct our kids that they should be one of these genders.
But that isn't the point. The fact is...
That is the point.
The fact is that people identify in different ways. And when you get bogged down by the idea that children might know that they're different, that they might be helped to understand why they're different, that the teachers teaching them might be prepared with the apparatus to explain it to them, that is a good thing.
100
I think
different
that's
ways.
if I may just
parent,
quickly
surely.
finish.
Do you know what neutroids is?
You might find it strange and unusual, and we might not be able to answer what every one of the 100 is. But that doesn't
You
mean
don't seem
that
to know
they
any
don't
of them.
exist. Well, I suspect you picked the
No,
two most...
I'm literally...
I hadn't heard of
there's an
half of
A
these
to B
before
list,
today.
and I'm just picking them at random.
You have things like...
So far, I've picked 3, then you have no idea what they are. Do you know what neutroids is?
Tell me.
Well, have a
Enlighten
stab.
me.
Have a stab.
Well, OK, I don't know.
Imagine you're a
neutroids
9-year-old
is.
kid and the BBC's told you to be one of these. So what's neutroids?
Well, no, that's not what would happen. What would happen is the kid would say how they're feeling.
Here's what
and the
neutroids
teacher-
is.
The
So
teacher might be
you want to
prepared
tell a
to help
9...
explain
Have
it
you got
to
any
them.
kids?
No, I don't.
Okay,
I'm
I've
only
got 4
27.
kids, right, including 3 boys, right? So I'm just trying to imagine a conversation with my 3 when they were 9, and my daughter's nearly 9 as well. She's like 7.5, right? Neutroids, someone with a null or neutral gender being neither male nor female, and in some cases a person who may also seek to reduce signs of their physical sex, right? Neutroids.
Which is absolutely fine if that's their vibe.
Right.
We should be teaching children not to be horrible. Like, kids can be awful. We should be teaching children to just let people get on with it, let people
Express
have their
their
own vibe. I
personalities.
keep saying vibe. I'm not a...
What is
vibe
wrong with
girl.
just being male, female, or trans?
And just have your
That's
personality.
it. In other words, 3 things. You're male or female, or you identify as something else, right?
But there are
what we
lots of
don't do
something
is have
else's.
these
That's the
100
thing.
ridiculous terms that even you, the world expert on gender, has no idea what any of them are.
Sparrow is, I would say, anti-gender, which is a term, that means before gender. Like, all children, at this age are developmentally not able to really understand gender yet. It's just something that they're not they don't have the understanding for. So it's not that the child is non-binary, it's that the child just doesn't have any gender yet.
Right, but the child, I mean, look, let me try and get my head around
Like
this.
obviously they do have anatomy.
Right, so what anatomy does Sparrow have?
Well, I mean, that's something that we don't usually discuss unless it's necessary with maybe a medical professional or, you know, a caregiver.
Right. So,
Ari, I just wonder if I can intervene here, because I think that a lot of people find this very confusing. But can you explain why you think that that isn't helpful?
Yes, it's a great question and a great clarification. What it is that, you know, yes, commonly people born with one type of anatomy will identify with one gender, people with different anatomy will identify with another, but that totally negates the fact that there are legitimately thousands of people all over the world for whom that is not the case.
When did Hazel
having a preference?
Yeah, when did Hazel decide that she was no longer going to be a girl?
Hazel decided that they were non-binary when they were about 4. They had been exploring gender before that, you know, trying on different pronouns, experimenting with different names. But they picked they, them pronouns and chose the name Hazel when they were 4
Ari,
years old.
with the greatest of respect, I have a 7-year-old daughter, right? When she was 4 years old, her main decision of the day was whether to watch Peppa Pig or Frozen. She had not a clue what about gender identity or non-binary or any of this stuff. And I put it to you that this wasn't Hazel's idea, was it? This was your idea. You decided that Hazel had gender issues that she needed to address, and you persuaded your daughter that she was no longer to be a girl, didn't you?
I mean, I personally don't agree with that assertion, but I can see how that could be misconstrued. You know, I think that every family environment is unique.
Arrow, when she gets to say 3 or even 2, when they can first start to talk, if her first words are, I want to be non-binary, or I want to be a boy, or I want to be a girl, would you just respect anything that a 2-year-old child would say? You accepted a 4-year-old's insistence on changing gender. Would you accept a 2-year-old?
I would accept that that child was exploring. You know, I think that at that age, gender
Ari, a child of 2 is
not
in
set
no.
in stone.
I'm sorry to be the stick in the mud here. A 2-year-old kid hasn't got a Scooby-Doo about any of this stuff. The idea that you would literally, the idea that you would even,
if my kid said that they wanted to pretend to be Scooby-Doo, I would play along. You know, and follow the child.
The idea that you as a parent would even countenance the idea that a 2-year-old child has any ability to form any serious perception of gender, I think, frankly, I put it to you respectfully, is utterly ridiculous and actually damaging to that child.
Well, then in that case, if a 2-year-old child, as you say, genuinely has no ability to conceptualize gender, isn't it toxic and bizarre that at 2 we are telling someone you are a boy because of your anatomy? If that 2-year-old genuinely can't conceptualize of what a boy is, isn't it make more sense that if a 2-year-old genuinely has no ability to process what a gender is, as you said, that I don't, you know, tell them what their gender is, and I don't emphasize gender constantly. I let them be what they are, which is a toddler.
Say you offer structure. What could be more of a structure than actually saying to your child, this is your name and that's your name? And if when you get to be an adult, you want to change your name, then you become your own adult, your own responsibility, you take your own decisions. Part of being a parent is until a child reaches adult age, actually the parent takes these decisions. What are you doing as a parent?
But I guess
as a parent, you're saying just get on with it.
Is that I feel that what you're expressing is a bit of childism, which is assuming that someone has to be a legal adult to have the capacity to know themselves.
Childism is a new
one. And I think a child can explore identity.
All right, Ari, I've heard just about every ism imaginable. I've never heard. I've been accused of every ism, and I'm struggling with this new world of isms, right? What is childism?
You're against children making their own decisions.
I believe that, well, childism is the normalization of the mistreatment of children just because they're young. like assuming that they can't have opinions or ideas, that they can't, obviously they do need guidance and structure, but mistreating them or treating them like property or denying their identity and autonomy.
So giving a child a gender because of its anatomy, assuming that they're boy or girl, or giving them a name, all that would be childism from your point of view.
Not giving them, but forcing them to use them regardless of what the child wanted.
So if a 3-year-old child decides, I'm no longer a boy or girl, I'm no longer going to be called Bob, I want to be called Doris, whatever it may be, if a 3-year-old child decides to do that, and I object and say, no, your name is Bob, not Doris, and you're a boy, not a girl, at 3, then I'm guilty of childism.
Potentially, yes.
All right, so that was some pretty heavy stuff. So I hope this podcast, even if you don't agree with the stuff you've heard, I hope it opens up your eyes enough to probably do some research and see what's true and not true. I've done the research, and I believe everything I have played here for everybody today. Anyhow, I hope you've enjoyed this special edition of Pod With Me. Until next time, don't fall off the pod.
That's a wrap.
All right, everybody, go right now to your app store and search for Pod With Me. We have our very own app. You can also check us out on social media. I really hope you've enjoyed this episode, and until next time, don't fall off the pod.
Credit.